the governor's new counsel on how to grow Michigan's population and their plan. And the no labels movement comes to town. Can a third-party candidate do anything but act as a spoiler? Today is Sunday, December 17th, 2023, and this is Flashpoint.
Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. I'm glad you're with us. Ever since Governor Whitmer announced the formation of a council to look into how to grow our state's population, I've been eager to have the co-chairs of that council on this program. But John Ricolta and Shirley Stancato really didn't have any findings or recommendations to talk about yet, so they kept asking me to sit tight. Well, now they do have findings to share and some strategies to explore. It is massively important that Michigan gets this right. There isn't a great future ahead for a state that not only can't attract new residents, but can't hang on to the ones that it already has. And John Ricolta and Shirley Stancato are here this morning to take us through the report released on Friday. Also, this past week, the No Labels movement made a stop in Michigan, making their case before the Detroit Economic Club. We've talked quite a bit about the impact a third-party candidate might have on the 2024 election. But as is often noted, no matter what the electorate says about wanting another option, third-party candidates only tend to run someone else's party off the table rather than having a really shot at winning. But Pat McCrory is the former governor of North Carolina, a co-chair of No Labels, and he thinks this time it's different. He's here to talk about that, too. And can we believe what people tell pollsters anymore? All today on Flashpoint. All right, Michigan is in the middle of an existential crisis. As the new report just released by the Growing Michigan Together Council puts it, we are losing too many of our talented young people and failing to attract others. And when they leave, our communities suffer from lost tax base and wages needed to support our public amenities, schools, roads, transit, and housing, and to attract businesses to our state. The cycle of healthy growth is broken. Puts it in pretty stark terms, and it has been the focus for my two guests since their appointment from Governor Whitmer to address the problem. The co-chairs of the Growing Michigan Together Council are here, Shirley Stancato and John Ricolta. Thanks so much for being here. As I said earlier in the program, I've been wanting you for some time. You didn't have anything yet to talk about, and now you do. This report last week. Let me start with you, Shirley. I think the biggest marching order here is trying to convince Michiganders that this is a crisis.
Exactly. And when we started this, we really didn't know what the situation, was all about. We didn't realize it. But the more information we got, the more we said, oh, my God, we kept having aha moment after aha moment.
In the bad way.
In a bad way. So just specifically, the number of young people who've left the state, and it's made the state older. So the under 19-year-olds have grown about 20% in the last 40 years, same amount for the 20 to 34. The plus 65 age group has grown 98%.
Yeah.
And so what that says is jobs, who can do the jobs, companies moving here, healthcare, all of those implications. That's just one example of the issue, and more information came, more data came, and then we started saying, John and I said, this is really a crisis.
Really hard to build growth on
Yes.
top of that, that calculus. John, Michigan ranks 49th out of 50 states when it comes to population growth. It is stark.
It is, and if you look at the trend for the last 50 years, our percentage of the population of the total U.S. population has declined precipitously. We used to have 19 congressional seats. Today we have 13. Yeah. And the projections would say that if we're not careful, we'll end up at 10. If we had just stayed average, 4% of the national population, if Michigan had its fair share, today we would have over 12.5 million people living in the state of Michigan. And you can imagine what 2.5 million people mean in terms of additional tax revenue, economic output. Yeah. All of that is at risk as we go forward.
And that the congressional number you talk about is more than just a metric. That means influence over the nation's affairs, which is often about self-interest, of course,
absolutely.
Right? For a lot of states.
Committee chairs and how much of the federal budget gets directed toward our state.
One of the things that was so interesting while you were doing your work, I kept seeing headlines and a lot of social media from people that said that mostly what you all were working on was ways to raise taxes. I was like, what are they reading that I'm not? Where's this coming from? But that tells you kind of where the resistance is already built into us fixing this.
Exactly. On the council, we said that we did not have any conversation about taxes, about how to pay for this. Because again, we were very, very specific about let's focus on what is the problem. And that then, what the problem is then would have a lot to do with whether and how you are paid for it, et cetera. But we didn't have any conversation about that at all. We looked at what's the problem, and it went deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
So John and I would say, you pick up the newspaper and it would say, you're going to raise taxes. And we said, well, again, where were they? We did not have that conversation. And today, in the report that came out, you see, that was not there at all.
It's not, but there are, John, a number of steps in here, and some of them are clearly going to cost money. You think that Michiganders should have their first 2 years of access to college should be free. We have been working toward that. We've seen that certainly with community college outreach. We talk about mass transit, which we talked about on the program last week, how important that is to attracting and keeping young people. That's not going to be free. I mean, a lot of this is not, let's not call it revenue neutral, right?
Well, that's absolutely true. But we provide at the back of the report a prescription of how you can fund these new initiatives. The first step is to take a look at the $50 billion budget that the state currently has and ask yourself this fundamental question. Is it efficient? Is there waste? And are the programs within that $50 billion budget returning on their investment the way it was intended? So the first place we have to look is in the $50 billion budget we have, and that's going to be a hard task to undertake. That means that certain special interest groups are going to lose out. I think that everyone's loath to go down that path, but we recommended that. Two, we've said we've got to look at the federal budget and ask ourselves, are we getting our fair share of those dollars? Are we fulfilling all the requirements of every one of those grant programs? Three, philanthropy. Philanthropy contacted us during this 6 months and said, how can we help? And we said to them, we're going to come back to you, but philanthropy can play a very, very big role in perhaps funding some of this. And so can private enterprise. And then finally, we have to take a look at our own tax structure today. And is it an appropriate tax structure for the 21st century? Then and only then could you then begin to convince the citizens in the state of Michigan that perhaps we ought to look at a different way of raising revenue? It is the caboose on a long, long train driven by a different engine.
This is tricky because, Shirley, when we look at where we are likely losing people to, we look at the growth states in America these days. A lot of them are states that don't have an income tax. So somewhere there does have to be a discussion about how we're going to tax people.
Exactly, but part of the reason we didn't have the discussion is because we wanted to make sure, again, we focused on what is the problem. And once you put the problem down, it got deeper and deeper and deeper, then we said, we don't have enough time. I will tell you the other thing that's happened is that Hillary Doe, who's the chief growth officer, went around this state and talked to people from the Upper Peninsula to the Lower Peninsula, East and West, more than 10,000 folks she spoke with, young people, to get information that is a part of this report. So it wasn't just that the governor gave us 6 months. We didn't even seat the council for about 6 weeks by the time we got the work groups together. Mm-hmm. And so we focused totally on what the work was for probably about 3.5 months is about the amount of time we had. And so we said to ourselves, to each other, is it important that we do this right or that we do this fast? And so we said, let's make sure we do it right. And then, as John said, there are things that have to happen after this.
I think, let me just make one more point on this issue. And that is in 1979, we passed the Headley Amendment as a state.
Right.
That amendment fundamentally changed how and how much taxes could be raised in the state of Michigan. And over the ensuing 50 or 40 years, Michigan has gone from the 5th highest tax state in the union to the 39th highest tax state in the union. And I think that the public deserves a really robust, factual debate about our revenues being spent properly and how far short are we in that revenue collection are we in terms of properly funding roads and education.
I was going to say education. We need the same conversation because when I got to Michigan 30 years ago, it was one of the leading states in the country when it came to education. I got here just about the time Proposal A was taking effect. I'll leave it up to somebody else to do the forensics on whether that led to our problems. But we need to have the same conversation because education is a big part of this conversation. I want to get to, though, the very first recommendation you make. If there's good news in this, John, the very first recommendation is that Michigan has to become become the innovation hub of the Midwest. And it seems to me that that's the one that we have jump-started. What's going on in Corktown, what's going on with the Michigan Innovation Center in District Detroit, and what's going to happen with Henry Ford Hospital. We're getting something right then.
We are, absolutely. And what we need to do is back to the education. We need to prepare the talent pipeline to be able to feed those innovation hubs with software engineers, entrepreneurs, other kind of biomedical engineers who can do the research and the commercialization of these new ideas that are come forth. So education is a huge fundamental piece of this. And while you didn't say it, I want to underscore, we have slipped from a top 10 state in terms of K through 12 to almost 40th.
Yep.
We are not providing the talent that needs to be for the 21st century.
And so companies are building their places elsewhere. They're moving elsewhere because we don't have the talent here in Michigan.
I highly recommend it. It's about 84 pages long. The website we will link on clickondetroit.com. Here it is at the bottom of the screen right now in the Growing Michigan Together Council report. Thank you both for the work on this.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Devin. Appreciate it.
You bet. We come back. We've got a lot more to come. This is Flashpoint on Local 4. Don't go away. All right, welcome back. We've talked a bit on this program about third-party candidacies in general and the No Labels movement in particular. Former Michigan Congressman Fred Upton is among its proponents. Well, this week, the No Labels movement took center stage in front of the Detroit Economic Club with co-chairs Jay Nixon, the former Democratic governor of Missouri, and my next guest, Pat McCrory, the former Republican governor of North Carolina. Governor McCrory, thanks very much for being here.
It's an honor to be here in your city, downtown last night. It was absolutely beautiful, and the work your leadership has done around here, I'm very impressed. Being a former mayor, I like to walk a city late at night.
You were the mayor of Charlotte.
Yes, exactly. You've done a great job.
Well, it's nice to hear.
I felt very safe. It was beautiful, and a great ice skating rink.
Yeah, it's lovely down there this time of year especially. So when I look back over the last 40 to 50 years of elections, every single one of those election years, somebody says, you know, this would be a great year. This is the year for a third-party candidate. But the rule generally is you only affect the outcome of someone else. You don't really put forth a winner. Why do you think it's different?
Well, every year, every 4 years, the presidential ticket comes up, and about 40% of the electorate says, I don't like either one.
Right.
This is different. We've never seen in American history where 65% of the American people, in surveys that just came out in the past week, are now saying that we don't want either former President Trump or President Biden. We don't want a rematch of the last ticket. And they feel they want another choice. So back when Perot ran, it was about 40% disagreement. Even then, at one time, he was leading in the polls at 35%.
Right.
And then he pulled out.
It ended up only getting a little less than about 19 to 20%.
But he had pulled out and then came back and had controversy. But that was when only 40% of the people didn't like either Bush or Clinton. And there really wasn't a big difference between Bush and Clinton. With Trump and Biden, we've never seen this feeling of, can't America do better? And I don't want to vote for either one. And I would say, if not now, never will we have a chance to have another choice for the people of America. And that's what the people are saying. That's not what No Labels is saying.
Right. But you know, right now, No Labels doesn't seem to have interest in becoming a party.
Right. By state law, it varies in each state, but we will have access to every ballot in all 50 states. And that's what we've been working on for the past 12 months. We're on 12 ballots now, which is the most we can be on based upon state law. We're going to be involved in about 28 to 29 states, actively getting petitions by the end of this year. And then there'll be about 13 or 14 states like Michigan where once we select a candidate, if we do after Super Tuesday decide to go ahead, then the candidate that we select for the third-party ticket
then it's up
will
to
get
them
the signatures, which isn't that hard.
But it's really difficult, I think, for people to get excited when you don't have a standard bearer, when you can't tell us if it's going to be, I mean, the names that have been kicked around, Joe Manchin, Liz Cheney. It's interesting because there's a Democrat and there's a Republican.
Well, that's our goal, is to have a Democrat and Republican, and we're looking at people, and people are looking at us from the military, from business, and politics. Former senators, current senators, governors, business people, and military.
Fred Upton apparently not interested in doing it.
Fred Upton's a major part of this leadership of No Labels, and we respect him greatly. And he's a Democrat. I'm a Republican. Jay Nixon, Ben Chavis, a Democrat. Again, it's showing bipartisan cooperation. Joe Lieberman is a fellow co-chairman with me. we have three goals. One was we need civil dialogue now more than ever in a divided nation.
Fred Upton's a Republican.
I'm sorry, Fred Upton's a Republican in Michigan, and I'm a Republican. Then we have Ben Chavis and Joe Lieberman, Larry Hogan, and Jay Nixon was speaking with me today at...
and so you've got this ecumenicalism kind of, but until you can tell somebody who the candidate's going to be, isn't it difficult to really get a fire lit under this
Yeah, but if we select it, if we see after Super Tuesday that the tickets will be Biden and Trump, then we will announce a selection. And then I think it will take off because the media will like that competition. And our polls right now are showing, remember, it's a state-by-state election.
Right.
You win by plurality, win or take all.
That's
in
right.
all but a few states.
Right.
So you win at 35, 36, 37%. And right now the polls are showing a unity ticket, a no-labels ticket, is ahead of a Trump or Biden thing.
Which is interesting, but the
We've never
suspicions
had that
remain.
before.
We have not seen that, but the suspicions. The head of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee said that this is clearly a right-wing funded plot. So there is this.
Fred Upton's a real right winger. I'll tell you that.
But there is this suspicion that it really can only impact one of the other candidates. We already have some other third-party candidates out there. We're not sure what Robert Kennedy's up to exactly.
We don't know.
But Jill Stein, and in an election that is as tight as these have been, the 3%, 4%, 2% even that somebody can peel off matters.
No, we're going to get in to win. We're not getting in to be a spoiler, as some of the Democratic and Republican leaders do. They want to protect their monopoly. They like that power monopoly. They get all the money. They get all the power, and they don't want that broken up.
You telling me No Labels wouldn't want to have that power?
No Labels is planning not to be around. This is one time.
Would be one election,
one
would
election.
not run for re-election.
In fact, once a candidate is selected, all our goal was to get access to that candidate to the ballot. No Labels is a nonprofit group. By law, they're a party when they put the term No Labels on it, but once a candidate is selected by all the delegates of No Labels, we will hand it over to the candidates, and we're out of it.
So then how do you go about creating a platform?
We actually, No Labels came out in New Hampshire about 3 months ago with 30 statements on 30 issues important to America, from the economy to immigration to crime to guns. You name the issue, we came much more than the Democrats or Republicans. Listen, I've been a city councilman, a mayor, a governor, and a U.S. Senate candidate. I've played the game. I've been played by the game. I know the game.
You've been played by the game.
I'm here to, I'm telling you right now, the game better change.
Yeah.
Because the American people are saying the system is broken. Our problems are not being solved. We're not getting results out of Washington. None of the two parties are incentivized to come together to solve, for example, the immigration problem. Let me tell you where No Labels is on immigration. We believe in a strong border. We believe in closing some of the loopholes of amnesty and other things that are so easy to get, but we also believe in the dreamers getting in. Neither party can agree to that. It's crazy.
It's going to be fascinating. Clearly, so many Americans do see toxicity in what we have. So I'm with you. There seems to be some space, but it's going to be fascinating to watch. Governor,
it's going to be fun.
I'm so grateful you were here to talk about it.
Our country deserves a better choice.
Governor Pat McCrory, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be in Detroit.
Good to have you here. We'll take a quick break. Back with more. This is Flashpoint on Local 4 in just a minute. All right, finally this morning, I remain so fascinated by the disconnect in American opinion polls. Right now, pretty important matter heading into a big election year. For example, Americans keep expressing pessimism about the American economy despite consumer spending being quite robust, despite a stock market hitting records, and despite admitting optimism about their own personal situation. Let's talk about it with our pollster here at Local 4, Richard Zuba of the Glenn Gariff Group. Richard, talk about this as a dilemma for you as a pollster to try to glean what's really going on in America.
Well, we've been polling on these economic questions, for quite some time here, and we want to ask similar questions to measure results. And one of the things we find is this deep pessimism, a sour economic mood. 69% of Michigan voters say the economy is weakening or in recession. 45% say inflation's going to get worse next year. And the one number that really stunned me, and this came out of the poll we did with the Detroit Regional Chamber, 52% of voters think the next generation's standard of living will be worse than theirs. But the reverse of that is when we ask them personally about their own situation, 80% of people in the labor force are not at all concerned about losing their jobs. 5.3% said they're very concerned. Over 70% say they are doing better off today than they were a year ago. And 75% of those in the labor force said they have had no problem finding a good paying job. Very different, diametrically opposed views of the economy.
Now, some of this is clearly coming from personal experience. I mean, there's no doubt for people who go to the grocery, they know that it's costing them more on their weekly shopping trip. Eggs are, the cost of eggs is up, on and on and on. And yet some of the rest of it, though, is clearly coming from what they're either consuming on, social media right now and mis and disinformation. I'm not hearing, Richard, near as many people talk right now going into an election year as we did 4 years ago about the influence of bad actors trying to feed discontent on the internet.
I think one of the things we're seeing here is we are in an environment where politics, the political stage, overcomes everything else. Everything we see or everything we believe, everything we're thinking is viewed through the lens of the political stage. And economics is now no different than that. And so while all these indicators may be good, the reality is people are going into grocery stores, and we're seeing this in our open-ended questions. They're going into grocery stores and they're talking about the cost of food. Groceries are too high. And we're seeing a really interesting difference by age here. Those who are over 50 are far more optimistic than those who are under 50. And I think it's important to remember that those of us over 50 have lived through inflation before, back in the 70s. And, we know what this is. We know it can be a lot worse than it is right now, frankly. Those under 50, this is their first experience with inflation. And it is insidious.
Yeah.
It goes up and it never comes down. I think that's what we're dealing with.
Yeah, I got about half a minute left, though. Talk about why you think Joe Biden is struggling, though, to take what is largely good economic news and turn it into good news for him and his polling numbers.
Well, I think part of that is that daily, everybody going into the grocery store, looking at the price of food every single day. They can't escape it. You have to buy food. And it's higher than it was. And there's no going back on that. I mean, the one thing we know is unless you have, deflation, the price does not necessarily drop here. And people have to deal with that consequence. And they're taking it out on Joe Biden right now in a similar way that was taken out on Jimmy Carter in the 1970s.
All right, we got to leave it there. I'm out of time, but always good to talk to you, Richard. We will talk to you again soon. Thank you to Richard Zuba. Thank you to you as well. Meet the Press coming up next. Have a great week. We'll see you next week for more of Flashpoint.